Thank you very much, Sonia, and thank you very much to Arvidsson for the opportunity to share some thoughts on the energy revolution, which I've heard earlier this morning. And indeed, it is an energy revolution, and we are at a critical moment. I think that the couple of slides that I've shared with you this morning will demonstrate that we have to make a leapfrog if Europe and Spain specifically wants to take advantage of the huge opportunity that we have ahead of us. And specifically the next 3 to 6 months, starting with actually the 9th and the 10th of February, when heads of member state governments are meeting in Brussels to decide what to do in response to the US IRA. And that's a lot of what I want to talk about today, because I think it's fundamental to understand what we have to do immediately in order to get to this golden promise of the energy revolution. I'll take you through a couple of slides just to let you know a little bit who I am and what we do, because I think most of you probably don't know me. And then I'll go into the general explanation and sharing of some thoughts in terms of where we are and where we should go. Resilient Group has been around for about 13 years, looking specifically at a lot of energy innovation projects. We have two main activities in the clean hydrogen, or green hydrogen rather, sector, as well as in the solar PV industry sector. And we've been founding members of both alliances that were set up. And a lot of our efforts stem from a document that we helped write, which is the Vision 2050 document, which was created in 2018 by the Commission in collaboration with industry, looking at what the future of our energy system should look like in Europe. So if you haven't read it, please take a look, because it's very interesting. Just very quickly, in hydrogen, we have a company called Resilient Hydrogen that started with projects back in 2018. We developed initially the Green Flamingo, which was one of the original IPCEI projects. And in Spain, we are quite successfully now developing hydrogenizing Barcelona, which we are expanding to other cities, including Valencia. So we're looking forward to meet with people here in Valencia. In terms of photovoltaics, we have a quite ambitious project under MCPV, where we are currently looking to launch our first cell manufacturing plant in the Netherlands in the second half of this year, and also looking to collaborate with Spanish companies, specifically around module production. And there we go. So into the energy transition. So if we look back at the past probably 5 to 10 years, Europe has done quite a good job to identify how we should kind of transition into this new decentralized, decarbonized energy environment. So as you see here, we have set up, we've done a lot of work. We've set up a lot of instruments. We have created a lot of new regulatory rules, environments that allow us to kind of push forward. And so we have quite a strong framework, as well as alliances, industry participation, to actually do this transition. However, as we now know, there are problems, and those problems come mainly from outside of Europe. But those problems are also opportunities. So one of the problems that we identified when COVID hit was that our supply chains are very fragile. And they're very fragile because we are highly, highly dependent on supplies coming out of mainly Asia. And we've now discovered that is a real problem. Not just the supply chain from China or Asia, but also the supply chains closer to home. When we're talking about natural gas, I think we all know what that means when the supply chain breaks down. So one of the big, let's say, challenges that we have, but also one of the big opportunities that we have, is to move from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen, really to reshore critical industries to Europe so that we can secure our energy security, whereas a couple of years ago, the energy transition was a lot about decarbonization. Since about 18 months ago, of course, it is all about energy security. And energy security is not just energy security, it's also economic security. Because as we've seen over the past 10 or 11 months, just the crisis that has occurred because of the war in Ukraine has cost Europe 1,000 billion euros just to kind of dampen, the shock that came with that crisis, and that money is still trickling out, not trickling out, it's rushing out on a daily basis. So we need to find a solution, and we need to find it fast. There needs to be a strategy to address energy security as well as the climate change. Now, of course, there's a lot of information. Politicians have to make difficult decisions. There's a lot of information that are given to politicians, which make it more difficult for them to make decisions. But at the end of the day, there's really 4 or 5 technologies that will secure our energy, and that will secure our economies, and that will secure our welfare, in a way. And so these are basically the 4 technologies. You could add heat pumps to them still, right? So if we have independence in these technologies in Europe, then basically we create our own energy independence, we create our own energy security, we create jobs, etc. So a lot of the energy security and energy independence discussions today are still about deployment. So we have to deploy wind, solar, hydrogen, etc., which is true. But if we are still dependent on external supply chains, then we don't have energy security. So we need to build our own integrated supply chain in Europe. We need to make sure that we have the raw materials and the manufacturing at scale in order to create this independence and security. Now that's great, so we figured it out, but the next thing we knew, last, I think, July or August, President Biden signs the US Inflation Reduction Act. And all of a sudden, the world changed, because with a single signature, basically, the United States has become the most attractive country to invest in. Why? Because the Inflation Reduction Act is very clear, it's very fast. So if I have a project in the United States and I have an investor that wants to invest into that project, I go to the IRS, I give them my documents, and 3 months later, I have a stamp and I have 10-year certainty on the subsidies. They call it tax credits, but they're subsidies. I have 10 years certainty on the subsidies of that project. And of course, we all know if you compare that to what we need to do in Europe to get basically state aid, it takes a lot longer time and it's a lot less certain. So this is very, very important, because investors basically are looking at, where am I going to invest my money? Am I going to invest it in a country or a region where I have certainty of state aid, of a very large state aid? Or do I invest my money in a region where I have uncertainty? And right now in Europe, we still have uncertainty. And so, of course, Europe very quickly got worried, because they now understand from a policy perspective that all those different instruments that we have in place, although they're very good, they're not competitive. And so we need to change. And fortunately, and we've been very actively involved in those discussions in Brussels and other European capitals, fortunately, this understanding has sunk in. So we're seeing a very good reaction from Brussels. We're seeing a very good reaction from most governments in the European Union, but we're not there yet, because right now what we're seeing is a lot of signaling, communication, but we need to have effective instruments in place. And we need to act fast. Of course, like we said before, in the last 10 months, we basically lost 1,000 billion euros just to dampen the impact of the energy crisis. And not only that, we found out that with these high energy prices, our existing industry, I'm not talking about the renewable energy industry, our existing industry in general, especially the industrial companies that use a lot of energy, they're closing down because they can't afford to run at energy prices that are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times higher than what we were used to. And not only are they closing down, they're also moving. BASF, for instance, Northvolt, etc. There's a whole list of companies that have announced recently that they will either relocate to the United States or to China even, and this is obviously a huge problem. So we need to act fast. And we need to act with a clear strategy as well, because we all need visibility, we all need certainty, we need to know what our policy framework is going to be over the next 10 years so that we can adjust our investment strategies, we can adjust our plans, and we can stay in Europe with confidence. And so what do we need in terms of a strategy, at least in terms of our point of view? We need a clear material sourcing strategy. Again, with funding from the public sector to help that out. We need advanced manufacturing at scale in order to be able to compete, and we need to build it up very fast. We, of course, need accelerated deployment of renewables, but that kind of follows. And we need to protect our market. This is something that in the Commission is not very often liked very much because we want to be, kind of the leader, the best boy in the class, etc. But we do need to protect our market from unlevel playing field competition. And so the best way to do that is to set our standards. So these are our standards, European standards. If you as a external supplier do not meet those standards, you can't get in. It's quite simple. Okay, and for all of that, we need a competitive policy and support framework. And then we have listed kind of the main ones here, which are absolutely fundamental to build our European industry. We need a combination of CapEx grant, OpEx grant standards, etc., in order to compete with the United States. And we need it now. And ideally, it's going to be a little bit more competitive than the US IRA, because that's the only way we're going to keep the investors here. And without investors, we're not going to make it. So, of course, we need a number of other things as well. We need to scale the value chain entirely. We need a lot of labor skills. We need to educate our people. So big training programs are very, very important. And on top of that, we need a lot of money, not only CapEx, but also we need a lot of working capital finance. To build these value chains in Europe, we need to finance the day-to-day operations, which will be quite substantial. And again, there's a very important role for policymakers to enable that. In terms of the timing, which I mentioned, there is a meeting of heads of state on the 9th and 10th of February. We are very hopeful that they will make the right decisions and that by March we will see a political framework that will outline clearly how we're going to implement the European renewable industry and also the European renewable manufacturing industry. With instruments to be available in June, this is specifically important because right now the IRA is going through a process with the US IRS, the tax authority in the US, whereby the IRS is determining the specific practical implementation of the IRA. So that means that by the second half of this year, investment decisions are going to start happening in the US. And once investment decisions start to be made in the US, investors are gone and they will not come back easily. So we have 5 months. So, taking all that into consideration, there's a number of other things, of course, that are already being discussed, and I think moving in the right direction, but again, they need to be in place so that they're actionable. We need expedite permitting. We need very fast permitting for industrial buildings as well, very importantly. And so to kind of wrap it all up together, we need speed, speed, speed. We need to do this very, very fast. And this is a cooperation between public and private sector actors. If we get it right, the future looks really bright, actually. Because if we get this in place fast and we start executing, which I'm sure all of you are going to be participating in actively as well, we're able to achieve all of these objectives for Europe: energy security, independence, better environment, healthier population, etc. We're going to get the jobs, we're going to see growth, and we're going to have new tax streams that will allow also to ensure social cohesion. And it will allow for Europe to build global leaders, new global leaders in sustainable growth. And on the right-hand side, there's a couple of companies that I've picked out that are already on the way to that objective. Now, why are we in a good position still? We're ahead on standards. We have great R&D in Europe, which we need to use, but we can only use it if we have industry. We have still world-leading technology companies. We have a good infrastructure and growth plans, and specifically in hydrogen. And I heard there was a lot of talk about hydrogen this morning in earlier discussions. And there will be some interesting news coming out at the end of this month about additional hydrogen valleys in Europe. So quite exciting. And by the way, Europe is a place where people want to live. And this is very important because we want to attract the brains, we want to attract the people to come here and help rebuild our energy sector. So all in all, if we look at things, there is a large global competition to lead this new clean tech sector going already at speed. Public funding and public policy will be absolutely crucial to see where the new clean energy champions will go and where investors will focus. And so if Europe right now is at an absolutely crucial crossroads from the policy perspective and cannot afford to fail in this. So thank you very much, and I would say let's get it moving. Looking forward to work with some of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your inspiring words. Thank you so much.